This morning I'll be critically investigating the work of a coach in contrast with my own coaching experience, looking at the research and reflect on the complex, dynamic and contextually rich role of a coach. Firstly, a coach has a critical role in conducting developmentally appropriate programs that focus on the enhancement of strengths and personal resources. Developmental research is also consistently highlighting the impact of supportive relationships with adults and role models as essential in bringing about positive development outcomes. Secondly, the role of a learner is very unclear within literature, but I found this. Learners are responsible for attending class, completing and reading and other assignments as prescribed by the teacher. Although this first role in the process is a passive listener, listening requires paying attention during class. This, I found, was a very behaviourism definition of a learner. So, me as a coach, I tend to take the behaviourist approach, which I'll explain in a minute, but firstly, what is behaviourism? A behaviourist approach is when learning should be progressed step by step, building on previously learnt material. The role of the coach is to deliver or transmit learning through small, simple tasks. The tasks are practiced repeatedly, and positive feedback reinforces the desired behaviour and stimulates motivation for the learner to continue. Behaviourism assumes that all learning can be measured. What a coach or a student can do as a learning outcome is a behaviour outcome. In this type of learning, cognitive processes are not necessary to explain the acquisition, maintenance, and generalization of behaviour. Learning is a product which is a result of conditioning. Operant conditioning occurs when the response is shaped by the reward, so that after each action that achieves the desired behaviour, the learner is rewarded. Successfully, conditioning of an operant response is inferred from an increase in its rate of occurrence as a function of a reward administered by the coach. As you can see from the pictures above, this is a general idea of how I coach. When coaching, I will also explain the drill or exercise the swimmers are doing, usually by demonstrating or getting the kids to tell me what they remember. When I set them off on their drill, they do 2 lengths or so, which with me watching closely. I praise those with thumbs up if it's right and stop those who are doing it incorrectly and correct them. Once done correctly, we move on to a harder drill incorporating both arms and legs, for example. After everyone has finished their length, I give feedback. If they are messing around, I will offer a reward. For example, if you all do this correctly, we will have more fun at the end for longer. And a consequence if they don't, for example, they will continue to swim until it's correct, and the longer it takes, the less fun they will get, which I hate to do because swimming is always meant to be fun, especially for children of this age. This is how I coach. In comparison to this is my coach, which you will see on the next slide. This is a theoretical analysis of a significant other. This is my swimming coach, Nigel Butler, who is head coach of Chippenham Swimming. And I believe that he takes a more constructive approach. This is when the coaches are concerned with how learners build their own mental structures through interaction with their environment. These theories of learning have a historical and cultural aspect with respect to the individual's experience. With constructivism, understanding and experience are in constant interaction, and through participation, the world is connected in all-knowing and learning environment. The constructive approach also stresses the developmental nature of learning, in that there are phases of learning skills. The way these are learned will change over time and experience. Vygotsky's work attempts to link the social and individual levels of cognition. A key proposition in understanding this is the zone of proximal development. The concept of ZPD has been subject to a range of interpretations, but is most commonly associated with the distance between problem-solving abilities of an individual when working alone and the individual's problem-solving abilities when an individual was assisted by or collaborated with more experienced people. This interpretation, characterized by a scaffolding analogy, has led to notions of learning that provides initial support for tasks and are later performed alone. How my coach works is that every athlete is individual, so therefore sets have options. For example, we might be doing 50 meters times 10 sprints. In this, it will say you have the option of doing your favourite stroke. This gives the athlete that individuality for them to adapt the training session to their liking. Secondly, I think a constructive approach is often shown when we're working towards competitions. We do taper sets, which include stroke rates and stroke count sets, as well as broken swims. These sets for us to learn how to swim our races in preparation for competition, in which we can then apply this to these competitions. We have to hit our stroke rates and stroke counts. However, Nigel doesn't tell us how to do this. He allows us to experiment on our speed of our arm stroke and legs to get the correct stroke rate and stroke length. This is us problem solving alone and assisted by older, more experienced team members in the lane, which we can then apply to a racing context. We do these types of sets several times to allow us as swimmers to solve the problem of how to swim the perfect race. Finally, looking at both techniques used by myself and my coach Nigel, there are both advantages and disadvantages of these techniques. The advantages and disadvantages of behaviourism are: it is easy to replicate and offer at a starting point for new coaches. The coach is concerned with the correct technique and the correct way to teach, rather than overcomplicating it and teaching it wrong. Good demonstrations and a level of knowledge allow the learner to make good progress, especially at the earlier stages of learning, which is why, as a swim teacher for younger children, this is a more suitable way for me to teach. The disadvantages, however, are: behaviourism is very linear and measurable progress can give unrealistic expectations about progress or lack of. Behaviourism tends to see all learners as the same, which won't work with my coach Nigel because he teaches older swimmers like me and we aren't all the same anymore. We specialise in different strokes. And finally, behaviourism coaches tend to be a transmitter of expertise rather than a facilitator of critical thought, which can sometimes just mean for younger children they don't have to think as much as when my coach Nigel teaches us, where we have to think more about what we're doing. The advantages and disadvantages of a constructivism approach are: they encourage learners to create opportunities for thinking rather than telling learners what to do, which works perfectly for my coach when he's teaching older swimmers like me. It encourages reciprocal learning through observing others and creating a supportive atmosphere in challenging situations. This can be quite good for those swimmers in my side of it when they're older, because there's an age difference, and it always helps when the older swimmers are being supportive towards some of the younger swimmers who are still just as good. So that's a really great atmosphere to have in swimming. And finally, this approach has a long-term benefits for the learner by equipping them to learn in a variety of ways that doesn't involve the coach. So we are learning not necessarily from the coach but from ourselves and our mistakes. The disadvantages, however, are: constructive approach of coaching has enormous potential but in practice is difficult to do well effectively when learners are learning. So for me, as a swim teacher for young children, it's harder for me to adopt that approach. One, because I'm still learning, and two, my learners are still learning how to swim, rather than coaching them on the little bits that they need to adapt, like my coach does for me. Secondly, problem solving requires time that coaches might not have. Also, learners will make mistakes and can become frustrated, which can be counterintuitive. So I only have half an hour slots, which means I need to get a lot done in a small amount of time, and I know that some of my children would get very frustrated if they kept doing something wrong and there was no help. Finally, another disadvantage is also settings to vague problems can cause coaches to become impatient with learners and then instruct them anyway. So this just means that they'll need more experience to be able to create problems for their athletes to solve. Both techniques have strengths and weaknesses, and neither one is right or wrong. However, I do believe a constructive approach is more beneficial for learners once the coach has gained enough knowledge to adapt this approach effectively. And for me to do this, I believe my future developments are to continue to coach lots. My coach has easily 25 years experience on me, so I need to not be afraid to branch out towards a more constructive approach. The parents that watch my children swim expect their children, to be able to do things within a couple of goes. So this approach parents won't understand. But I am the coach and I need to learn to be more confident in myself. And if those parents have a problem or don't understand, then I can explain my techniques, which is one thing I think I really need to work on in my future development. Secondly, I think I need to branch out of my comfort zone. I've always taught swimming and I do swimming, so I know and understand swimming really well. I think to be able to coach different sports, this might be able to give me help me influence my coaching style in the future, so I understand the different types of sports and how there might be different ways of coaching in those different sports, which I won't necessarily see just by coaching swimming. Finally, I need to understand it's okay to have a bad training session. Not all training sessions will be where the learners get everything right and are doing everything perfectly. Sometimes it's about letting them work it out for themselves, and this is something I'm quite scared to do at the moment because I'm still learning, but I do think in future development I want to be able to let myself have these so-called bad training sessions to allow my swimmers or whatever sport I'm coaching to problem solve and learn from their mistakes, because that's a great way of letting children and adults learn. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any of them now. Just above is the references that I used to help me create this presentation. Again, thank you for listening.